So now I hope everyone was able to get to know some of the people in their small groups a little bit. We're going to continue using the breakout tool during the rest of the experience. And it is a good way to like kind of bring the big group together and still feel like you're getting to talk to new people. But now we're going to, I'd like to introduce Emilie Schario, who's going to be our keynote speaker today. A little bit about Emilie's background. Emilie has a lot of experience working remotely. I think roughly 6 years now, working remotely at a startup in Baltimore, and then from there now working in Georgia, but working for GitLab, which is the world's largest all-remote organization. So Emilie today is going to speak to us a little bit about, one, on the organization level, how can you cultivate gatherings, meetings, connections amongst larger groups of people digitally, and then secondly, how can you as an individual still connect, be open and vulnerable in a virtual setting with people that you are engaging with on a regular basis. So two very, I think, pertinent topics and lots of questions there to be. And I think, Emilie, you can go ahead and take it away. Thanks again for being our keynote.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, folks, for having me. So my name is Emilie Schario. Hearing people discover new features of Zoom is a novelty for me because I've spent the last 2 years working at GitLab, where Zoom is my primary form of interaction with my coworkers. And it's easy to take for granted how much we work in that every day. And the last couple of weeks, or yeah, it feels like a couple of weeks, but it hasn't been that long, have been a great reminder of how just how much I've gotten to take that for granted, that my norm is working from my home office, which is where I am right now. This is my work desk. That's my personal desk. This is my work laptop. That's my personal laptop. So I was paying bills this morning, which is why it's open and there's a pile of papers around it. And drawing these kind of boundaries in my life, despite the fact that I'm still in my home. So I'm going to run through a brief PowerPoint today, and then we'll just kind of dive into questions. Thanks so much for the intro, Shad. A little bit about GitLab first, and a little bit about me. So GitLab, like Shad said in the intro, is the largest all-remote company in the world. We're 1,200 people across 65 countries, and everyone works remotely. So wherever that is for you at any point in time, not everyone's a nomad. I live in one home and go to my office every day. Some people do the digital nomad thing, but much more likely, most people just kind of work from their home or a coffee shop or whatever environment, a co-working space, whatever environment sets them up for success. For me personally, I graduated from college in 2015, moved into startups via Venture for America fellowship, worked out of a Baltimore-based fintech startup for a while, where I was based in Baltimore, but the team that I was on was totally remote. So my manager was in Providence, Rhode Island, and our designer was in California, and folks were scattered. We got together on a quarterly basis, and that was kind of my dipping my toe into remote work. I was with my now husband, then boyfriend, back in college. We got serious, moved in together. I moved to follow his career, which has no geographic flexibility, and I've been working 100% remote ever since. I've worked in a couple, hey Chandler, can you mute please? Thanks. I've worked in a couple of different remote configurations. So there's hybrid remote, where some people are in an office and some people are working remotely. And then there's all remote, which is the situation we're in at GitLab, where there is no office, everyone works remotely. So that's a little bit about me. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and just kind of talk you through these slides. So view, present, and now we're sharing my screen. So first, I'll point you to allremote.info, this really, really phenomenal resource that we've spent the last a long time building out at GitLab. Tons of resources there. It would literally be too much for me to go through in this call, even if I took the whole thing. So please go visit that. And if you have questions, that's a great place to start. You can go down the wormhole that's best for you. So Thriving as a remote team, a foundational toolkit. Like I said, my name's Emilie Schario. I've been at GitLab for 2 years. Started as a data analyst, moved into a data engineering role, and now I'm an internal strategy consultant on the chief of staff team. So I think a good place to start is thinking about what you or your teams need in order to work remotely effectively. The answer isn't the same to everyone. And so what I'm sharing is going to be my experience from the GitLab perspective. This is a company for where we are today. But what I needed even, 4 years ago when I graduated from college and was in that first role was really different from what I need today to be successful. And the same is going to be true for you and your orgs. There are different ways this manifests at some teams, things like English lessons. So at GitLab, because we're fully remote, we're around the world, some people don't have English as their first language, but it is the language of business. So English lessons or tutoring are something that we offer as a benefit because it's something that our team members need to be more confident in their English. So spend some time thinking about what you or your teams need in order to work effectively remotely. So for me, like Zoom is one of the big things. Video calls, being able to see body language is something that's really important to me. There's no right answer here. Again, it's what's best for you and your team. So I've shared a little bit about me. I won't dive in anymore, but that's my Twitter handle if you want to continue the conversation afterwards. So GitLab's mission is everyone can contribute. This is from contributing to how we run the company, to how we build the product. GitLab itself is an open core product. How we run the company, we use our GitLab handbook. It's available at about.gitlab.com/handbook. It's currently 5,000 pages long. But the thing to highlight here is that everyone can contribute to it. So anyone with a gitlab.com account, which is free to create, can go in and propose a change to how we run the business, independent of whether or not you work for GitLab. And that is our mission, is really making it possible for everyone to contribute. And that's where this bias towards all remote comes from. If we want everyone to contribute, we can't limit it to just people in San Francisco or New York. We want to make it so that anyone around the world can contribute to our organization. So we recently launched the GitLab Remote Work Report about understanding who works remotely, what makes remote workers tick, what are the things that drive them crazy, what additional resources do they need to be successful? So this GIF kind of goes quickly. It can be a little bit hard to see, but some of the cool things that came out of this were that 60% of people who work remotely don't find the digital nomad thing appealing. So that's not a standard. People feel that remote work leverages the playing field, that they feel that when a whole company is working remotely as opposed to some, they have the opportunity to be promoted just like their in-office coworkers. So lots of really, really great information here, and that's available at that allremote.info link. So the chat says, for anyone who's unclear about what Git is, it's a distributed code version management tool. Yeah, that's great. Git and GitLab are different things. GitLab is a software that makes it easier to collaborate. We're a single application for the entire DevOps platform, from planning it all the way through releasing it, and it's built on Git. But thanks for the addition, Mike. So a little bit more about GitLab. Like I said, 1,200 team members across 65 countries with 2,200 code contributors. I mentioned earlier that our mission is everyone can contribute. And so this is people who do not work for GitLab. It's not their job to contribute, but we've had 2,200 code contributors to the GitLab product, not to mention the tens of thousands of contributors to building the product in other ways, such as giving feedback on an idea, a use case on a story, submitting an issue, feature requests, things like that. We're currently in use by over 100,000 organizations. So we believe that all remote is the future of work, But all remote is not easy, and especially for organizations that have been thrust into working remotely, it can feel rushed or hard or difficult or confusing. And what we're hoping to do right now in this season of difficulty is just share what we figured out over the last couple of years through building this company remotely with other organizations that are going through this transition, whether it's just for now or something organizations might want to do long term. So things that are difficult and are confusing, and as companies transition to remote, we're hearing questions like, how do I manage a remote team? What tools do we need? How do I know that my team members are working or have what they need to be successful? So lots of questions out there right now. And we're seeing companies just kind of suddenly transition to remote. This isn't a surprise to most of you, but when you're told not to come into the office anymore, that's a really different remote work system than someone who's intentionally built a company remote. So we genuinely just want to help. Remote work is beneficial to lots of things. It's beneficial to companies. So one of the things we highlight is that at some point, your company will not all be sitting around the same desk. Whether you expand across multiple floors in an office building or you open a second office somewhere, you're going to be working distributed. And so working remotely, all remote from the beginning, and operating in this way forces you to do things that you would do anyway and do them earlier. Remote work is great because it forces that discipline from the beginning. We pay people local market rates, which allows us to bring more team members on board, and then hire more people, pay them competitive rates, give people around the world opportunity to work for a Silicon Valley style startup, independent of where they are. And we don't pay an office cost in exchange for that. And we get to hire the best people independent of the geography they're in. But it's hard. If you're
sorry, just quick question. You're saying kind of like paying people market rate. How do you determine market? Is it like by where they actually are living?
Yeah. So can you hold that question for a bit, Mickey, and we can come back to it at the end and just remind me about it? Because I want to share my screen. I'll show you where you can actually find the details on that in our handbook. So remote work isn't easy though. What if you don't have a home office? Like, especially if you live in a geo with more expensive rent, you might not have an extra bedroom that you can convert into a home office with a work desk and a personal desk. And if you haven't been intentional about building this stuff, you might not have a desk at home at all. And that's hard if you are now being forced to work from your kitchen table in the same way that you eat dinner. That can be a difficult transition. People who never have thought about how much communication is the right amount of communication, or where to, like, how do you talk to someone about something that's important without being able to just like tap them on the shoulder? And then generally, like, how to approach this problem or where to go or things like that. So these are a couple best practices that I want to share just from our experience. But like I said, this is a very GitLab centric experience. And so there's an asterisk here that what worked for us might not work for you, but hopefully it can be a suggestion for where to get started. So the first thing is break old habits. So whether you use Slack or Teams or whatever chat tool, Twist, whatever tool you're used to using, we at GitLab have found it to be most successful to eliminate Slack as your tool where work happens. Slack is not where work happens at GitLab. Slack is where communication happens. And those are different things because work happens in GitLab. So we use GitLab to run the company, not just in terms of writing code and building the product, but also how we plan marketing events, how we plan major projects. Finance uses it to close our books every month. The data team uses it to outline their projects, portfolio planning, OKR strategies, whole nine yards. We use GitLab. And so GitLab is where work happens. And every response in Slack is then like, when a question comes up, it's not, hey, how do I close the books at the end of the month? It's like, here's a link to where we outline how we close the books at the end of the month. And that's usually a link to our handbook. And in exchange for that, and the way we really enforce that is we, all Slack messages disappear at the end of 90 days. So that can't be a source that people turn to for long-term answers. People who organize meetings, they organize meetings. Every meeting has an agenda. Agendas have outline of what needs to be covered, what decisions need to be made, why certain people need to be included. So we're not walking into a meeting and be like, oh yeah, what's this meeting about? There's an agenda beforehand. And so if you've been invited to a meeting, you can read the agenda and decide whether or not it's the best use of your time. The goal is to give people the opportunity to work as much as you can. And that means keeping them out of meetings so that they can actually do work. The DRI, I'm looking at the galley view right now. How many people have heard this term DRI before? Not that many. So it's the directly responsible individual. The goal is to push a decision to the lowest level in the company that it can be held at, that it can be made at. So that's the DRI. And then the DRI is accountable. This is the person who makes the decision. If you've heard of RACI charts, responsible, accountable, consulted, informed. So the DRI is responsible. They are accountable for the decision. Everyone is consulted because everyone can contribute, but we don't need consensus. The DRI makes the decision, and everyone is informed because, again, everyone can contribute. We work in public. We reimburse co-working spaces and offices if that's something people prefer to work in. And then I work from home, so I don't get that, but I get my internet reimbursed. And then, like many workplaces, we strive to create an inclusive environment that enables people to work. Now, there are a couple caveats that come with remote work, and asynchronous, the second point here, is I think the most important. So if people are not working in the same office, we can't all be working on the same thing at the same time. We don't want to be. We want to make sure people are doing their best work from wherever they are at whatever time it might be for them. And that means being able to make it easy for people to work asynchronously. Part of that comes from building trust and community. That means knowing that when I ask Sally to do something, I'm going to trust that Sally's going to get it done because we have built this trust and community, not just in relationships to getting projects done, but also in relation to we built kind of the same social interactions with that we would as coworkers sitting in an office. A single source of truth is really important. So I'm going to share my screen to answer Mickey's question as soon as we're done with these slides. And we'll go see how someone, in this case me, will actually go find the information on how we pay competitive market rates at GitLab, how our location factors found out. And the answer is there's one place to go find that answer. But that way, if there's only one place to find this answer, you're finding the latest, most accurate information. And I mentioned that part of our secret sauce is the GitLab handbook. Ours is public. I know not every company works that way. The advantage of making the handbook public, and this is at about.gitlab.com/handbook, but the advantage of making it public is you get to use the greatest search engine in the world on it. So you can look for what you're looking for without having to be, while leveraging Google or your search engine of choice. And sorry, let me back up there. One thing I'll add is you don't have to master plan a handbook. The way you start these things is just by starting them. So whatever process you're facing now, you could even do one for this, which is how to host this event remotely. And the first page in the handbook might say use Zoom and have breakout rooms and ensure there's a Google Doc with guidelines where people can take notes and ask questions, right? That is your points for the day, and that's your first initiation towards a handbook. So working asynchronously is, I mentioned earlier how important this is, but The best way to think about this is assuming all your coworkers are asleep and you're not going to hear from them soon. And this requires a bit more thought, because that means you might find yourself blocked by a team member who's not sitting at their desk. But that's the way we want to work. You should always have 1 or 2 or 3 next steps for a project in your mind, so that you can anticipate what needs to happen, where you're probably going to get blocked, and how to push them forward, and what other projects you'll kind of toggle between as you're blocked. This requires communication to be thoughtful. So you don't just say, hey, Zach, do you have the answer to this question? You say, hey, Zach, I've been talking to Joey about this project around the corporate marketing board, and we think that we should change the logo from purple to orange because of XYZ. What do you think? And when you're bringing all the context whenever you're making an ask, it's a little bit more work on me as the person asking the question, but it brings the other people up to speed much more quickly, and it really makes it so communication flows more easily, and everyone has the information they need to push things forward. Asynchronous work is really great because it allows team members to have what we call a non-linear workday. Some people may have heard this called a split shift, where someone comes to work in the morning and then they go do things and then they come back to work in the evening. Or maybe they work an evening shift if they're a night owl, or they work really early if they're an early bird, whatever it might be. And there are mental health benefits to not feeling always on. So if you spend 2 minutes Googling around the complaints of Slack, it's that people feel like they're always on. Removing that, if your default is asynchronous, you remove that pressure for people to always feel always on. And transitioning to remote isn't easy, but the best thing you can do is lead by example. So get your executives out of the office, make sure they're working remotely. That's going to help them feel the pain points of remote work and make it a lot easier for the rest of the org to adopt remote. Build your tool stack. I'll highlight what we're going to use at GitLab next. And then remember that you don't have to have the perfect workflow overnight. You'll find a pain point, solve that pain point, find another, solve that pain point, and just keep going until you feel like you're in a really great place. So our utility belt, which is a funny reference to, superheroes who have all their things. This is what we use to do remote well. So the handbook, I've mentioned this a couple times now. We use Gmail, we use GitLab, we use Slack, and then we use Zoom. These are kind of like the big pillars of how we work remotely successfully. So we are working towards making it easier for more companies to follow our lead. We call this the post office world. And we hope that as more companies experience this, they will share their experiences with us so we can help build this all remote guide together. So allremote.info is the all remote guide. If you scroll down, we have a million resources here on different things and how we do them and how to contribute. And we would love to have this be built out by more companies as they're going through this. So that's a bit. Let me actually dive in here now to answer Mickey's questions, and then I saw a few more questions come in on the chat. So when we pay market rate, what does that look like? So I'm going to go to my team's page in the handbook. So I'm on the chief of staff team, like I mentioned earlier. My job at GitLab is called an internal strategy consultant. So every job has what's called a job family. That's what this page is. It has my responsibilities, my requirements, my performance indicators, the specialization to my role. In my case, it's data, the hiring process to hire someone. And then it has this compensation section where we talk about the different components of your compensation. So it's your salary plus your stock options. Certain roles have bonuses. Mine is not one of them. Discretionary bonus for performance-based, like when you crush it. Retirement contributions. So we have a small 401k match. Pay for equipment like my laptop and my monitor and my desk. I work remotely. That's part of my compensation because I work whenever I want. Unlimited time off. I took 6 weeks off last calendar year, wrote a tweet bragging about it. My CEO replied, yeah, but I took 9, do better next year. I was like, wait, really, what? And then I went on his calendar, he really did take 9. And then, standard benefits that we would find. And benefits here match wherever you are. So the way this works, the salary calculator, every role has this. This is all public, by the way. I'm not logged into anything here, but if you wanted to know what this salary made in, who wants to shout out a geo?
Baltimore.
Okay, so let's go with Maryland. So all of Maryland has one location factor, 633. And this is what the range would be based on where you were: learning in the role, growing in the role, thriving in the role, expert in the role. And then as your geography changes, this number, this annual base pay, will also change. There's no variable pay component in this role. That's more for like sales roles. Let's say Connecticut would have, these numbers change. And the way that works, oh, by the way, I'll just highlight since I'm on this page, all of our stock options, also all of our expected valuation for them is also public, because we want people to understand their compensation. We say your base salary is part of your compensation, but so are your options. And so this role, I wasn't hired directly into this role, so this isn't my circumstance, but this role comes with this many stock options. You would click that, whatever date you got them, and you can kind of see the different scenarios, what they would be worth over time. So just highlighting the salary calculator there. If we wanted to see what different locations make, though, we have something called a location factor. So all of the location factors are stored, again, publicly in locationfactors.yaml. And so these are all the different regions in the US and in the world that we have location factors for, and we're constantly reevaluating these every year. And the location factor helps dictate kind of the multiplier used on San Francisco. Benjamin asks, what if someone moves after they're hired? Great question. In order to move to outside of if you move within down the street, whatever, like no changes to your salary, that's fine. If you need to move in such a way that could change your location factor, you have to just run that by your management team, and they'll work with you to try to handle that. But this is a great question to ask the handbook. So let's actually search for it. I use DuckDuckGo as my search engine. So I'm going to search site:/about.gitlab.com/handbook and say why we pay location factor moving. I think this is in the So might be under this compensation review. Oh no. Moving location factor. I actually think it's in the code of conduct. I'd have to dig into it. But the short version to answer your question, Ben, is you just get approval from your manager. They talk to the people business partner about it. And as long as everyone agrees, your salary changes just like it would out of the calculator. So that means if you move to a lower cost of living area with a lower location factor, your salary will go down. But that's because we pay local market rates. We're not paying you a straight salary. So a couple other questions came in that I didn't answer as we went. I think what would probably make this most interesting is if people unmuted themselves and actually asked those questions, and then we can kind of talk through them. So looking at the questions that came to me privately, but also generally, so it looks like Ben Weinberg has the next question.
Yeah, so I'm curious because I also work at my company's kind of a hybrid remote, but we're scaling, and now of course we're full remote for the time being. So how much has Git grown since you've been there, And I'd really love to hear about some of the benefits and challenges that you've experienced kind of scaling in a fully remote environment.
Yeah, great question. So when I joined GitLab in June 2018, we were 300, just under 350 people. And now we're 1,200. So we've grown a lot. The odd thing about growing when you're not in an office is that you don't always see it. I mean, it's not like we're outgrowing an office space every day, or you don't see new people in the office all the time. There are new names on Slack, but like you might not interact with them. So every Thursday we have a bot that announces all the people who will start the following week. And it's cool to watch that because you just see all these people who are coming every week. The first week of the new year, we had 42 people start at GitLab, and that was kind of crazy. But generally, we've had about 20 people start in that time. Challenges. So I think one of the hardest things, it's hard to, I'll caveat this with like, it's hard to say what's the challenge of scaling in an all remote environment versus just scaling, because I don't have the experience to compare to of doing this same kind of hyper growth in an in-office environment. But it's knowing who to go to, because as the company has grown, individuals' roles have changed. So the person who I used to go to with questions about payroll is now running a team of 5 people who manage payroll and expenses and things like that. And going to her would inevitably mean she's just going to point me to the right person. So it's good to know who those people are, but it's also just like keeping up with information is really hard because there's so much information coming at you when there's so much going on at the company. Does that answer your question? Is there anything you want to dive into more there?
No, that's really helpful. Thank you.
Cool. Mira, do you want to verbalize your feelings?
Would you like to, Mira?
No, I didn't ask the question, Rajan.
Yeah, I asked this back when you're talking the deadlines one.
Yeah, whatever you want.
Yeah. So earlier you were talking about like you were using Sally, and you're saying, oh, like if there's trust between teammates, and if I ask Sally to do this, she'll get it done. But how do you set the deadlines, and like who gets to set them? Because I imagine you might be like, hey, Sally, can I get this by Friday? And she might be like, no, I have too much stuff to do otherwise. So like, just, yeah, how does all that work?
Yeah. So before I tell you what we do, how does that work in your company today?
Our company is quite small, so we're able to work as a team and set deadlines. But I will say, even, and this is not an issue of remote or in person, but I think we are not very good at setting deadlines that are quite accurate. And we've used tools like Asana and the timeline feature on there, but it's definitely been a challenge.
Yeah. I asked that because I don't think working remotely has that much to do with the answer to this question. So part of it is definitely like, if you cannot, I think part of it is the DRI is responsible for laying the timeline and saying like, hey, we're going to need your part by Friday. And it's on you as the manager of your attention and your commitment to your team members to say, I can't get that done by Friday. Or say, if I need to do that by Friday, I can do it, but which one of these other tasks needs to get cut? And that's something that will come with experience and knowledge over time as someone learns what's actually doable. So I'm in the situation right now where I told someone I would have a 5-minute recording for them for Friday. And I ran out of time on Friday. And so after this call, I'm going to do that so that they get it before they come into work on Monday. I dropped the ball. It happens. When I looked at what was a priority, that didn't make the cut. And I know that I'm not going to block them by having it to them before they come into work on Monday. That's a trade-off that I made as someone who is responsible for a commitment that I made to my team members. And it's not that work wants me to work over the weekend. It's that I feel strongly that I should stick to the commitments I've made. Does that help?
It does. And it actually raised another question is, do you guys have an org chart, like a visual of how your team is broken down and all that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm going to share my screen again. So about.gitlab.com is going to be where you can see the whole team. And you can kind of click in and see people's bios and where we are in the world and blah, blah, blah. Lots of really cool things here. This takes a second to load because of my ad blockers. But if we were to scroll right below here to the blurb, there's an org chart. So I'm going to open this in a new tab so that we can get this map to load because it's actually really cool once it loads. And this is the actual org chart. So you can click to collapse and to expand. And let's say I know that I need to work with finance on something. I might go to Paul and look at, okay, let's go to the VP finance, but I want to talk to the finance business partner for marketing or for sales. And that's who I'm going to go to. And that's kind of how you navigate that. And that definitely makes it a lot easier to figure out who the right person is. Or if you're like, hey, Sally dropped the ball and she said it was because she had competing priorities. She escalated to her manager and her manager helped her decide what was most important. I need to get in touch with her manager to understand how I can make sure my project, has the right priority associated with it or whatever it might be. Does that make sense?
That does. Thank you.
The other thing I'll just add there is when we work in GitLab, we have really transparent views of what people are working on. So you could go to my GitLab profile, gitlab.com/Emilie, and kind of see what projects I've been pushing forward. And that's a great way to see what else other people have that they're working on right now. Okay, so going on to the next question. Ben has another question about Slack channels.
Yeah, I need to scroll back up to that. But basically my question was, what Slack channels do you find useful for staying kind of informed about what's going on from a business level, and then also kind of what channels do you all have that are really useful for actually building community and keeping up with people on a more personal level?
Yeah, we have a Slack channel called Emilie's, EMILYS, where we have like coffee chats occasionally. It's all the Emilies in the company, and I think it's so much fun. It's cross-functional. It has nothing to do with our jobs. It's just because we have the same or similar name. My Emilie is spelled uniquely, but it's a cool way to build relationships with people. That one's one of my favorites. But we have a channel called Company Announcements, which is company-wide announcements. This is the equivalent of general and a lot of other Slack channels. Every function has a high-level channel, so marketing, sales, engineering, finance. I like to be in those because the information that pops up in those tend to be the most high-level updates of the functions. Most of the execs have their own channels that they use kind of like stream of conscious E, so CEO, CRO. We have an e-group channel. I'm looking at my Slack channels that are started right now. We have a thanks channel. I'll highlight this one. It's just a great place to go give your team members shout outs for doing great things. So we have 6 values at GitLab: collaboration, results, efficiency, diversity and inclusion, iteration, and transparency. They spell out the word credit, CREDIT. And we try to, when we thank people, we thank them for living out our values. So I might thank someone for going above and beyond when it comes to collaboration. Thanks is a great way to really celebrate your colleagues. We have a channel called Fit Lab for people to talk about fitness. We have a channel called Coffee and Tea where people talk about coffee. We have travel, GitLab 5 for people who are into financial independence, retire early. So we have, all the standard work channels, but we also just have channels for the things we care about. There's a football channel that is not about football, it's about soccer. So I'll let you guess where the person who created it lived. But then we also just have all the kind of standard work e-channels, and channels are free. So create a channel for a new project, use it, and then archive the channel. Like, there's no reason not to have more channels. Does that help, or is there a specific question there I can help with?
No, that was super useful. Thank you.
Mike Wed, you've got the next question.
Yeah, I guess it was mainly like an operational question. It just seemed like even when you were kind of like searching through, you know, like what are the pay factors? Like how does this affect that? Like it seemed like the documentation was just really solid. So how do you, it seems pretty vital to running a company of that size globally and remotely. So how does GitLab manage all of that documentation, keep it up to date, kind of as the source of truth for everyone, and then probably in many languages? Like how does that operation take place?
Yeah, so it's only in English because English is the only working language at GitLab. This is our like in terms of updating our handbook. So this is a general outline of it, and this is where people can go to get their information. The best way to keep it up to date is when you see something wrong, fix it. So the analogy that I use a lot to people when they join the company, they feel like, oh, well, I didn't write it. I don't want to step on anyone's toes. We believe in short toes at GitLab. And so if you see something, fix it on the spot. It's kind of like if you're walking through a fast food restaurant or a parking lot or a store, whatever it might be, and you see a straw wrapper on the ground, you should just pick it up and go. You don't need to get permission to pick it up and to fix things to make it better. And part of that is knowing that it's never going to be perfect. You just need to make it a little bit better than it was before. So if it's a typo, a missing piece of punctuation, a confusing sentence, you make the change. We use merge requests to make changes to the handbook, and then you assign it to the DRI, the directly responsible individual for that page or that content. So for example, my teams page in the handbook, I might be the DRI for that. Our values page in the handbook, that our CEO is the DRI for that. Our sales ops page in the handbook, I would assign any MRs that touch that page to the head of sales ops, who's the DRI for that.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm just thinking about all the overhead in my company that would be involved in if, like, you know, DMing someone with like page numbers and all this stuff. You guys could probably just like commit a modification request on a page or something.
Yeah, you want to see what that looks like right now?
Why not?
Cool. So I'm going to share desktop 1. Okay, so this is my team's page in the handbook. I noticed, so I added this chart the other day. I must have made a mistake when I added it because this conference is not a year long. So the way I would make this change, you scroll all the way to the bottom of any page in the handbook, hit open in Web IDE. That's going to pop up the text behind this page. The handbook is a static site that uses middleman. If we scroll to where the problem in that chart was, it's a middleman chart. Here we go. It's 1 day long on 2020. Let's change this. Why did it come up as 1 year then? Let's say it's 2 days long and see if that fixed the problem. So commit change length of SASTR. Commit. This is going to create a new merge request. I can assign the, oh, there's a typo. Let's let that merge request create. Create a new merge request. I'll assign it to the right person. For now, I'll assign it to me so I don't lose it. Submit merge requests. And what's this is going to do is actually going to build a review app where I can see what it looks like before I merge. So that's how easy it is to make a change to the handbook.
That's super cool. Yeah.
Thanks. Okay, so Grayson, you've got the next question.
Yeah, so what I was curious about, you guys, you said you've expanded to like 1,200 people in a relatively short time and you're adding new people all the time. What does onboarding look like when you're completely remote? How do you feel? Like, how does someone new feel like they're a part of the team? Who do they meet on day one?
Yeah, so I'm going to get you a link for this.
And maybe just because I see Shabman's question is similar, and I know timing wise we don't have a ton of time left, so maybe we can also build on that of like how do you kind of build these relationships more generally while being remote.
Yeah, that's a great question. So onboarding, the way onboarding works, we have a template, an onboarding template that's like a 250 thing checklist that you're going to do in your first 5 days, or first 5 days, and then also there's more after that. But I just dropped a link to it in the chat. You can see what this looks like. So your first 5 days are pretty structured. You don't do any of your regular job. You're just onboarding to GitLab, the company. The second week at GitLab is when you're onboarding to your team in your role per se. So in your first day, part of what your manager does before you join is you get assigned an onboarding buddy, who's someone to connect with and who answers your question about Zoom if you've never used it before, or Slack, or they're your go-to when like, hey, I can't get into my email. So that's kind of like the gist of onboarding. In terms of building relationships, we have something called coffee chats, which are the primary form in which people build relationships, especially outside of their team. And a coffee chat doesn't require an agenda. So I mentioned earlier, meetings are structured. They have docs and the agendas and people who run them and decisions that need to be made in them. But coffee chats are like just an opportunity to like bring your coffee or water, whatever your jam of choice might be, and just kind of talk just like you would over a water cooler or taking a colleague out. And we do it over Zoom. And so, for example, I have one colleague, Scott, who every 6 weeks we have lunch together. We both bring our lunch plates and we sit here, we put our cameras, and we like have lunch together. And that is our way of making sure we're in touch on what each of us is working on and what we're thinking about in personal lives. And I know about his kids and he knows about my life and what books we're reading and things like that. So all the things that you build relationships with people over in person, you can still do over this. It just requires additional intentionality, right? When it's not going to magically happen at a water cooler, you have to put a calendar invite on someone's calendar. But if you're willing to do the work, you're going to see the results of building those intimate relationships.
Great. Jump in here really quickly. If you have time for, hello.
Yeah.
I think we have time for one last question. I think Chad's, and it's a good one. Maybe we even can take it a little bigger of like how to be productive during this time, or building more structure into your days. And then as a reminder to everybody else on the call, Emilie provided her Twitter handle, and after this event, we'll share out that information. So if you want to keep continuing the conversation and reaching out, Emilie's been kind enough to offer her own social media to continue those conversations.
Yeah. So being productive, the biggest advice that people on the internet have for you about transitioning to remote work is to get dressed every day. And I say, like, do not get dressed every day if you do not want to get dressed every day. If this is new and you're really want to lean into working out of pajamas and your boss isn't going to reprimand you, like, do your thing. Do whatever is going to work best for you. And that's going to require some trial and error. So for me personally, I wear what my friend Kevin calls the business mullet, where from the top up, I look presentable, and from the bottom down, I'm wearing shorts every day, and you don't know. And that's one of my favorite things about working remotely is that I don't need to wear pants. I can wear shorts every day. And so do whatever is going to work for you. So the advice I'm going to give is my recommendations, especially in this moment of transition, but take it with that caveat in mind that just because it's what works best for me or is my advice is not true for everyone. So the 3 tips that I really want people to take is, one, it's okay if right now is hard. There's a lot going on. Last week was really unproductive for me because I was distracted, and it had nothing to do with me transitioning to remote. So if you're transitioning to remote right now and it's hard, it's not you, it's the world. Number two, just because we're social distancing and quarantining, that doesn't mean you're trapped in your house. So feel free to go outside, get some fresh air. One of my boundaries is I go get the mail from the mailbox every single day. And some days, like yesterday, the mail lady didn't come. And I know because I went to the mailbox to get the mail. So do whatever you need to do. I noticed that being outside makes a really big difference for my mental health. I don't want to be trapped in the boundaries of my house or in the four walls of my house every day. So do whatever you need to do, figure out what those are and get outside. Or if outside's not your thing, reading a book is, or whatever it might be. And then three, like this is a really cool time to repurpose your commute. So you don't have to commute to work every day. You've got 30, 40, 60 new free minutes on your calendar. Like pick up a new hobby, start a new book, whatever it might be. Like spend 30 minutes on a coffee chat with someone every day, whatever it might be. Figure out what it is, repurpose that time into something more effective. Or more exciting. Like there's a lot going on right now that's scary and confusing and distracting and hard, and figure out where you can create your own delight. So my email address is my firstname.lastname@gmail.com. You have my Twitter handle, which is also just my firstname.my-last-name, or first name, last name, no punctuation. I'll get those slides over to the organizing team after this, and then we can kind of run from there. Thanks so much, folks, for having me.
Yeah, thank you, Emily.
Yeah. And
yeah, we can do like virtual round of applause for Emily. Like I said,
Thank you.
I almost felt like I was in the crowd. That was really cool.
That was actually really, really cool. I've hosted a Zoom call with 600 team members on it before, but we've never come on mute to clap for people. So that was really cool.
New experiences. Welcome to Expose. Yeah, so we'll send out your contact information after the call. But thank you so much, Emily. We had a lot of questions, which is a great sign that this seems to be like a really important transition period for everyone. So I'm excited to even just hear what everyone's thoughts are going to be afterwards. So we'll be in touch with you too.
Awesome. Thank you, folks, and have a great Sunday. And best of luck in this transition. I know it's hard, but I have faith you can do it.
Woo.
Talk to you soon.
Yeah. All right. Mickey is going to, we're a little behind again, but we're going to try to move quickly through this next section. Mickey's going to take it away and talk to a little bit about how Exposed is thinking and providing new solutions to still socially engage during this period. Mickey, you're on mute, by the way.
Cool. So yeah, on my screen, you probably can see we have kind of our exposed response to social distance. So we have created a Slack community. So if you click this link, you can just join our Slack. Over the next few days, we'll be explaining more about the different Slack channels we have. Generally, our Slack is a great place to continue conversations that start at one of these exposed gatherings, but also just start the conversations that have already happened at exposed and jump into those. So for example, yeah, we all kind of have our, since we're a plant-based community, we have different aspects of, what is our relationship to plant-based diets, but then there's also things like different articles and ideas, or we've done dating exposed. So dating is one of the topics, or spirituality exposed. So you can like kind of add to your own thoughts, and we can keep these conversations moving virtually. Next, AJ, you want to explain the one-on-ones?
Exposed one-on-ones. I'm sure there are many people here that seem cool, seem interesting. Maybe you didn't get a chance to be on a breakout with them, but you want to get to know them better. You can sign up for an exposed one-on-one and kind of get serendipitously partnered up with another exposer and get to have a meaningful conversation and hang out with them. It's a really great time to stay connected and meet new people during this time of social distancing.
And then Chad, you want to talk about the daily distance challenge?
Yes, going on mute, off mute, I mean, and then, hold up, yeah, here we are. All right, can we see this? So another thing we're launching is the Exposed Daily Distance Challenge during this social distancing quarantine period. This is going to be a crowdsourced activity. So we basically, it's in your agenda, but if you're going to click into the link for Exposed Daily Distance Challenge, one, we're creating a test bank of ideas of just different challenges that you can do to engage and like build structure into your days during this period so that we can kind of all transition together into this period. I just threw an idea out there for calling someone whom you haven't spoken to in the last 30 days. So scheduling that and just having that call is one of the challenges. Once we get a whole test bank of ideas built, which I'm really hoping everyone is gung-ho and throwing some wild ideas out there, we're going to then assign challenges for every day for the next 14 days. And then you're going to do the challenge and upload photos to the Slack channel so that we can all, share and kind of do these challenges and grow together. So when you're thinking through your exposed daily distance challenges, think about things that, one, are like helping us connect through these times, or two, helping us build structure and grow as individuals during this period too. So that's the Exposed Daily Distance Challenge.
Do we want to maybe for 2 minutes just open up if people wanted to throw out different ideas, they can just go off mute and throw it out there?
Yeah, I can type them in while we're doing it. Oh, wow. Beautiful suggestion, Hannah. I already love it. She's already on it.
Write a handwritten card.
Okay.
Oh, thank the teacher.
Yes, I love that.
And mail it.
Oh.
Okay.
Feel free to go off mute and just shout them out.
Yeah. Ooh, someone just X'd out the right handwritten.
Oh no.
Call an elderly family member who might be feeling a little bit more isolated than usual in this time.
Offer to buy groceries for someone who's disabled in your area.
Wow, that's great.
Find an email in your inbox that is over 5 years old and reply.
Rajan, I feel like it's a very related, challenge.
Oh, very what?
You really? It's like a you problem.
No, not a problem. Like, I'm sure.
I identify with that. That's a great idea.
I think it'd be good if we had buy like a gift card for a local business or restaurant. It could be like $5, whatever is like conscientious of your budget, but a way to support local businesses.
Nice, I like that. It's on the board. Getting some great ideas out here, people. I'm loving it.
Find some local places you can volunteer, like out of school. I know a lot of schools, public schools, are doing like curbside pickup for lunches and stuff, and they need volunteers. So.
Cool. Maybe Mike, Wed, and I were having a little chat. We can send applications to GitLab